Hello, everyone. Welcome to a Tip Tuesday. So today's lesson, very important one. So I've been doing this work with Tradeway now for over a decade, and I would say that the topic that we are discussing today is probably the biggest issue or problem or obstacle that any of our students have to overcome. And quite frankly, if they don't, then trading will be very difficult, if not be something that they just completely stop doing at some point. So today's lesson, very important. In fact, I would suspect for a lot of people, it is an obstacle that if they can't overcome it, which easily can be done. All right. So let's start there. Right. It can be done. You can do this thing that we're going to be talking about. You can do it. But we are going to talk about why it is so difficult. And the thing that we're talking about today is stopping out. So we call it a stop loss. Well, quite frankly, it means that I'm in a trade and I'm losing money and I want to stop losing money. Ironically, the very thing that we want to do, stop losing money, is often part of the reason why we actually put ourselves in a position to lose more money. Sounds strange, doesn't it? Yeah. So, what I find with people is that in general, we are somewhat prideful, right? Whether we think we are or not, we desire to be right. And none of us out there is like, hey, I hope I'm wrong and I'm going to go around and be wrong as often as I can. I don't know many people like that. Most of us want to be right. And even using those words, I know Ross in particular doesn't like the phrase right or wrong because he feels like it means that you have some determination in how that particular stock moves. So whether it goes up or down, whether you make money or not, that you have some direct correlation to this action, which isn't really the case. So I think we do have to be a little careful about the verbiage that we use. But having said that, I was a very competitive person. Now, some people still think I am, but I'm so much less competitive than I used to be. It's sad. I mean, I hated to lose at anything. I remember we would be playing pickup basketball games, and if I lost, I mean, we almost had friendships dissolve over pickup basketball games. That's how serious that we were. It's just I wanted to win at everything. Didn't matter what sport it was. Didn't matter if it was a board game, if it was a card game. I mean, schoolwork, everything. I wanted to win. And just to give you a little example about the extreme nature to which I wanted to win, we were out just at a church camp playing beach volleyball. And I like to have one of the setters from the high school varsity team on my side because they'd be in the right spot and they'd set you up and they weren't like some of those guys just trying to, spike everything. So we were playing with one of these girls and she set up a ball and it was beautiful. And I went up, timed it perfectly, and absolutely smashed a ball. And I mean, I hit this thing so hard that the person on the other side of the net immediately hit him right in the face. Bam, just like that. And the next thing I noticed is they like fell to the ground. So, I mean, it was like impact, fall to the ground. And I'm sitting here like high-fiving my teammates like, oh, man, that was beautiful. I'm giving this girl a high five for that set. I'm like, that was so incredible. I'm just like, I'm pumped. Like, I'm just, jumping around like, let's do it again. And not even paying attention to the other side of the net. I'm just like, oh, that was so good. I look up right after my celebration and I look over to the other side of the net, and lo and behold, the person that fell to the ground was my girlfriend at the time. I had hit the ball so hard that it actually imprinted the name of the volleyball across her cheek. You can literally see the name of the volleyball on her cheek. I had hit it so hard. And here I am high-fiving everybody, talking about this spike and how great it was. And I just, killed the person on the other side. And then it occurred to me, all right, pretty much just knocked my girlfriend to the ground and hit it so hard, I left the imprint of the volleyball on her face. So that might give you a little insight as to how competitive I was. Like it didn't occur to me, all right, maybe I shouldn't hit it that hard. Maybe I should pay attention to who's on the other side of the net. No, I just hammered it because the ball was there. I wanted to win. I wanted to win. And I carried that mentality over into stock trading. And a lot of you guys and gals can relate to that. You're fairly competitive by nature. Now, it may be at something like running, or it may be at, I don't know, well, just whatever, something that you're competitive and you just know it's in you. You want to win. You have this driving desire. And we carry that over with us into stock trading. The problem with this is that we have this tendency then to think that somehow I can control the outcome, right? So if I was playing, football, if I make this kick, we could win. If I miss this kick, we could lose. It would be my fault. Now, of course, there were 50 other plays in the game where we could have scored here or there that would have made a huge difference. But I carried that mentality with me, right? I'm like, if I miss this, then everybody's going to hate me. I've got to make this. Plus, I wanted to win, that kind of thing. So carry that over into stock trading. The problem with this is, guys, is that the very thing we desire to win, right, that we're in some ways inadequately prepared, most of us, if we're being honest, most of us, to really handle the idea of losing, right? Because now it's like compounded. Not only is the trade that we're in not working, but we're losing money. So here we are, we're in this business, we're in this stock trading business, we're trying to make money. And now rather than making money, we're having an expense. And then we're having to kind of deal with this trade that we got into. Out of all the trades we could have done, we got into this trade, and now this trade isn't working. And then that just kind of compounds everything. It just gets even, more and more frustrating. And so because we have this desire to not lose, then what ends up happening is we let the ego come in and say, well, I haven't lost. I just need more time. Okay. So I haven't lost. I've just run out of time. Well, what we say in stock trading is, well, I have more time. So I'll just give it more time to work. Well, it's not working. So because maybe it's a lack of education, maybe it's a lack of understanding, we're not real sure, right? Is the stock going to turn around? Is the market going to turn around? Or is it just going to continue to go the direction that it's going, which is currently the opposite of what I wanted to see? And if that's the case, now we stay in a trade. We don't stop out. Why? Because by stopping out, we know that as soon as we close that trade, we either have a profit, or in this case, we have an expense. And we say, well, I don't want an expense. I don't want to lose this amount of money. So here's what we do. We stay in a trade even longer. And then the trade continues to go against us. And then we end up with even bigger expenses. Well, one of Tradeway's big philosophies is we say we want to win big and lose little. Most people hear the win big, and then it's like we just stop talking. Right? It's the lose little, and they're like, huh? What? Did you say something? I was just totally caught up in the win big. No. Win big and lose little. And that's a sustainable opportunity if we do it. But what if you kind of win okay? You kind of win big sometimes, but then you lose big most of the time or every time? Are you going to be ahead at the end of a year or 2, 5, 10 years? For most people, the answer is no. If you have big losses and you're essentially digging a big hole, it's a lot harder to fill that hole in. So imagine, if you will, that I had a hole in my backyard, right? So we decided, hey, let's go put a pool in. We had people come in with a backhoe. They dig it all out. And then I said to you, all right, listen, I've decided I don't want the pool. It's a hassle. We've got a neighborhood pool anyway. It's fine. I don't want the pool. I want you to go fill in a hole. Now you have the opportunity. You can go fill in that big hole where we were going to put a pool, or you can fill in this hole that the dogs dug out there. Now, which one do you want to fill in? You just need to fill in one of those. Everybody's going to say, let me do the small one. So we understand conceptually that filling in the big hole, right, is going to take a lot more work. It's going to take a lot more effort. It's going to take a lot more time. Fill in that small hole, we might just be able to throw some dirt on it and then be done and move on. Well, guys, listen, if you have an account and you're trying to make it grow, but you keep going into the hole, how big is that hole going to be, right? And which one is easier to climb out of? One that's small or one that's growing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger? So the idea of a stop loss becomes very, very important, if not pivotal, to our trading, and particularly our long-term trading capabilities. You are going to be in a trade that doesn't go the way that you desire. That's going to happen. That happens to all of us in this system here. But if we can stop out and say, listen, it's going to be an expense anyway. Let me go ahead and take this expense, right? And I make it small enough, then if I get the next trade right, I might be ahead after just one trade, or certainly after maybe a couple, right? But the idea, if I'm winning big, losing little, is maybe I could lose several times, win big once, and then still be up. That's what we're trying to get you to do. It's not to say that, you have to win every trade that you're in, but in order to maintain this philosophy that you're going to be able to do this and do it well over time, you're going to have to be committed to stopping out and admitting when a trade is not going your way, that that's not a personal affront, okay? And that your goal isn't to be upset or to be vindicated by being right. The goal is to make money. So if your trade is going to lose more money, then there's no reason for you to stay in. And so I'm going to share with you guys here. We just got a couple of minutes left, and I'm going to show you a trade and just give you guys an idea of what I mean by this. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you here. And as you walk through this, it's a short example, but you'll see very easily and very quickly here that when we look at this trade setup, now it's not my favorite trade, all right? It's not even close to my favorite trade. But what we can clearly see here, when I hit my period key, you see this crosshair comes up. Now, what we can clearly see is that $27 is a support area. So for the past 6 weeks, when this stock, AT&T, has reached the $27 area, it has moved up. Now, not a lot, 50, 75 cents maybe, but it's moved up. Now, one of the things I don't like about this trade is the EMAs on top. So these exponential moving averages on top, they tend to act as resistance. They're like weights, and they push it down. But if we were to basically ignore that, which is never a great idea, but if let's just say we did, one of the things that we would still note is that despite the EMAs being on top, $27 is a very strong, very good horizontal support. So if you were to buy this stock at $27 and you say, I think it's going to go up to $27.50, $27.70, maybe even $28, maybe, probably not, but maybe. Okay, then buying at 27 makes a ton of sense. However, if your premise is I bought at 27 and that is my support line, the other part of this equation is you say, well, all right, now what if it goes the opposite way? What if this time, rather than popping up off support, it actually breaks down through support? Well, guys, listen, this is where I need to cast my pride aside and say, listen, it was a great buy point. But if it breaks through support, I need to stop out. I need to stop out sooner rather than later, because the longer I stay in this trade, the further it's going to drop. Remember, I thought it was going to go up. So if it's going to go up, but it drops through support, well, support is like a trampoline. Our trampoline has a hole in it. It's not going to do us any good to stay in this trade as it drops and drops and drops. So we need to have a plan for stopping out of a trade that's not going to work, regardless of whether we stay in or not. So here's what I'm going to do. I want you guys to focus over here on this portion of the screen. I'm going to bring this line back up. We're just going to drop it over here, kind of out of sight. But I want everybody to stay right there, right with that line. And then let's see what happens. Oh, so the very next day after we decided to get in this trade, it breaks through our support line. Guys, guess what? Do you know what you ought to do and you ought to do right now? Stop out. You ought to stop out. Why? Well, because your trampoline has a hole in it. Your whole reason for doing this trade was that you thought 27 was support. Good job. You're right. It was. It was 3 times, if not 4, really. Okay. But it's not this time. And the longer we stay in, the more we're going to lose. The greater our expense is going to be, the deeper our hole is going to be. Okay, so remember, we could have stopped out at 27. Now here we are all the way down to 26. So we didn't want to lose money. So what are we doing? We're losing more money. Does anybody see the hypocrisy of that? I didn't want to lose money. So now I'm losing more money? Well, how could I have lost less money? I could have stopped out and said, listen, I bought at 27. That was going to be support. It's broken through support. I'm going to stop out. But if I stay in, it continued to drop. And this is a trade that a student did recently. And that's why I wanted to use that, because this is what's actually happening today. So this is what's happened the last 3 days here. We have Friday, Monday, today, Tuesday. So, you could have stopped out for a small expense. Now you're looking at it going, well, I could have lost about 20, 30 cents a share. Now I'm down $1.50 plus per share. Well, you had a little hole here. Now you've got a much bigger hole. So what do we want you to do? One, we want you to be committed to good patterns. All right. So was this likely to work? Well, it could have. Had it worked in times, yes, it could. But with the EMAs on top, there are always potentially resistance. Once you got negative market tone, then that created an atmosphere for this stock to drop. And then the conditions were right for it to really, really drop. But it should have been a small expense. Okay. And that's what we want you guys to see. All right. That if the trade is going to lose money anyway, I am much better off taking a small expense than I am staying in the trade and letting it turn into an even bigger expense, because now that is really defeating the purpose, right? So if you're going to be losing anyway, stop losing, right? Use that stop loss, make that expense as small as possible. And I'll close with this. What is the difference between an expense and a loss? I used to tell people, it depends on how much it makes you cry. Like it depends on whether or not it makes you cry. Well, what I have figured out over time is that that's not really the best way to look at it. Every business has expenses, whether that is electric bills, paying employees, etc. But here's the thing. All of those things ought to lead me to be in a position where I can benefit from them. So I have employees, they ought to benefit me. Their work ought to benefit our company. Therefore, it ought to benefit those who work for the company, right? Electricity, well, I got to have it. If we're not open, it's going to be harder to sell things. So the expense is something that's necessary for us to run a business, but an expense needs to be something that benefits us. So when you have an expense, what you need to do is to say, what can I learn from this particular trade? And then ask yourself, despite the expense, did I do the right thing at the right time? And if you just have a loss, here's what happens with a loss. You learn nothing from it, but you have less money. So guys, listen, if you have a trade that goes the wrong way, ask yourself, what did I learn from it? How is it going to make me a better trader? And if those things happen, then even your expenses can end up being good things. So nobody likes losing. We all want to win. But sometimes in trading stocks, the best thing that we can do is recognize when we've lost and make it a small expense. Learn from it, move forward, become a better trader as a result of it. But don't let those expenses pile up and become greater, because that ends up hurting you in the long run. All right, guys, thanks for being with us today. Appreciate you being on, and we will see you next time.